Okay, so we are going to talk about CBT. And what CBT is it's a type of therapy that therapists can give. Okay, there's different types of therapy. There's psychoanalysis, there's EFT, there's CBT. Okay, CBT is basically cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to go a little bit through where it came from, and okay, cool, that's better. Yeah. Where it came from and who came up with it and the history, a little bit about it behind it. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a form of psychological treatment that's been demonstrated to be effective for a range of problems, including depression, anxiety disorders, alcohol, drug use problems, marital problems, eating disorders, and severe mental illness. So there's a range and there's a plethora of research with CBT and how effective it is, and how it's more effective than other therapies that are out there, because there's a lot of research that backs this up. Okay, it's even more effective, some people believe, and research does support, than psychiatric medicines sometimes. Psychiatric medications, or even just other forms of psychological therapy, like, for example, talk therapy. You know, like we can talk about your issue till we're blue in the face, but when it comes to actually rectifying thinking distortions and understanding, okay, I have this thinking pattern, I'm stuck in a pattern, my mind is stuck in a pattern and I can't escape this pattern. When we really want to attack what it is that where this thinking distortion that we have to approach it with certain techniques. We have to approach it from the standpoint of, okay, exactly what's going on, and this is the reality of the situation, and these are the tools that I'm going to use to combat these negative thoughts that are kind of taking over my brain. So we can get caught up in a loop pattern. There's some therapists that say that, you know, the root to all our thoughts kind of has to do with three main subjects that we're like obsessed with, and so our thoughts kind of float around all these three loci inside of our brain. But with CBT, it kind of just takes the irrational feelings and tries to make sense of any irrational feelings, so that there's a more logical approach to understanding, okay, well, why am I thinking this? Am I just dealing with an irrational emotion, or is there some weight? Is there some reality to this? So you'll see him here, he is the Dalai Lama. That's Aaron Beck. Aaron Beck came up with this CBT in the 1960s. He studied psychoanalysis in the beginning, but before him, there was Albert Ellis. See, these guys are so happy. There's Albert Ellis. He's from the 1950s, and he developed something that was emotional behavior therapy. So it wasn't cognitive behavior therapy, it was emotion-based. So this kind of, this foundation is something that, that Aaron Beck kind of piggybacked off of, so to speak, even though he had more of a psychoanalysis background. And when you think of psychoanalysis, you think of Freud, you know, blame your mother for everything kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, a lot of therapists don't necessarily, I know that Freud is probably one of the most famous psychologists that everybody knows about, and he sexualized everything, and everything was libido, and everything was sex. But there are so many other therapists that don't think that way, and they just think that there's other ways of understanding our psyche, and that it's multifaceted. So with cognitive behavior therapy, it's the idea that our feelings, that our thoughts, and that our behavior are all one animal, that they're all aspects of the same animal, and that all of these little aspects make up our being. And so when you only pay attention to one part of it, take into account perhaps the behavioral part, or you don't take into part the feelings part, and you're just taking into the thought part, you're not going to understand or get through the pattern of the distortion that you might be having. So how does it work? You recognize your thinking distortion, you understand your behavior and the motivation of others. So you're going to understand, okay, well, why am I doing this? What is motivating my behavior right now? What feeling is motivating? What thought is motivating it? And you get an understanding for that. And then as you get an understanding for you, you could probably understand others and ask them, of course, not make assumptions about their behavioral issues or their thinking patterns or their emotions, and then you can come to a consensus about others. But it's only through this experimental method that you can really delve into other people or understand other people in any way. So it could also help you to use better problem-solving skills, because obviously if you're having a thinking distortion, you're going to try and get to the root of it, and you're going to try and work through it as much as you can. And of course, develop greater confidence in your own abilities. And this is huge, and we're going to go into the thinking distortions in a second. But when you have thinking distortions, it's usually based in this very black and white thinking, you know, good, bad, you know, beautiful, ugly, you know, we've got all these different extremes that we tend to think in. And when we think in extremes, we miss the whole gray area of what the truth is about a certain situation. And so cognitive behavioral therapy helps us to delve into those gray areas. So it changes behavior patterns by we face our fears. We understand maybe our fear isn't that big of a deal. We use role play to prepare for future problematic interactions. So we think about the probabilities of certain situations based off of the spectrum of how we're feeling or thinking or behaving. We become more methodical and more intentional about the way that we think, learning to calm the mind and relax the body as well. So what are cognitive distortions? These are unrealistic and unhelpful ways of thinking. And they are actually indoctrinated in us from a very early age, right? Even with boys and girls, two extremes of thinking, two expectations for two beings, and there's extreme opposites in the way that we are conditioned about certain things, particularly with gender, or when it has to do with race, or when it has to do with politics or things like that. There's always extremism. And obviously in that extremism, there's a lot of gray areas that are not being explored. And so in that extremism, there's a lot of distortion going on, right? And miscommunication. And so when we look at these cognitive distortions, we try to identify them, and then we practice shifting our thinking. Okay, so the first distortion, like I said, is all or nothing thinking. This is black and white thinking, right? So you basically look at things in two categories: male, female, black, white, good, evil. You're looking in two different extremes, and that's how your mind is functioning. But the thing is that when you really look at it and when you use the tools to understand what you're actually looking at, you'll see that it's not black and white, that there's so many gray areas. So for an example, when you use extreme examples, for example, you can say, I'm the worst cook. I hate pizza. You're using an extreme word. She is the smartest. He is the weakest. If I fail that test, I'll never be successful. So these are extreme thinking. So she's not the smartest. Sometimes she has a miscalculation. He's not the weakest. He was strong in this situation, right? Hating pizza. Okay, maybe you dislike pizza, but do you really loathe it? You know? So think about the gray areas of this. Okay, do you like sauce? Do you like crust? Do you hate the whole pizza? Do you not like that pizza? Do you like the pizza in LA, or do you like the pizza in New York? Or do you just hate cheese? Do you want vegan cheese? So there's so many aspects in between the two absolutes. And when we use words like greatest, biggest, strongest, when we use those comparative words and we say that there's someone on the top and there's someone on the bottom, these are extreme ways of thinking, and they're called cognitive distortions because it's not always that way. The next one is overgeneralization. I have the cap of doom that you can wear when you overgeneralize. So, it's always like you're identifying something and then you're creating a generalization about that thing that you just generalized. So for example, I have buck teeth, so I'll never be attractive. Or I'm feisty, so I can never keep a lover. We can go to the next one. He hates me. He hates me because we had an argument. So there's these extreme ideas attached to maybe one situation or maybe one feature or one characteristic. People with buck teeth can be very attractive. People who are feisty can be great lovers. You can have an argument with somebody and the person can love you, you know? So if you can just switch it around in your head, you can say, oh wait, yeah, I went extreme and I overgeneralized based off of something that I thought was true all the time. We see this with racism. We see this with sexism, any ism, right? We see this when a quality is generalized over a population, and then you're going to assign almost a future to that person